think we need a SaaS community for the industry. It doesn't naturally have one because each of the companies are selling to different markets, different verticals, different business models, different price points. So there's no natural aggregation of all of these companies that are going global from New Zealand. And so a community will be really useful to bring together peers who have an ability to compare notes, whether you're a marketing leader, a product leader, a technology leader, a sales leader, a CEO and a founder.
Getting together with like-minded individuals or who have the same leadership positions as you, or are even just someone in your field, like this, getting together with a bunch of different salespeople, actually builds your capability, your confidence, gets you thinking outside the box.
I think there is great value in perspective of stepping back, engaging externally, and from that comes a lot of creativity, perspective, insight that's not available when you're constantly looking within.
For founders and CEOs, it's a pretty lonely job and you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So you need support to deal with those highs and those lows in particular. And the best way to do that is to have a community of like-minded founders and leaders who are in the same boat as you.
A lot of SaaS growth is coming from the regions inside of New Zealand. It's lonely enough if you're in Auckland, but being in the regions it can be really lonely, so doing what we can to encourage meetups and encourage community in those areas is hugely important for New Zealand.
I think we need a cohesive voice to help unite all of our industries together and also work more cohesively with the government.
We should have a really big, ambitious target when it comes to the SaaS sector. I see no reason why in 10 years the SaaS sector can't be New Zealand's #1 exporter and also the employer of the highest paid jobs in the country. I see a world where we have 500 or so global champions building productivity software for the world's best businesses, all done here in Aotearoa. Join the community that we're building around the Kiwi SaaS companies, participate, pay it forward, and encourage those in your organisations and those peers of yours that you know to join the community as well.
Just join, sign up, and register your interest today.
Ata Marie, good morning and a very warm welcome to Kicking SaaS in 2022, hosted by the Kiwi SaaS community. Now, whether you're in the office today, maybe you're on the couch, maybe you're even in bed, it is great to have you with us for this kōrero. I'm Jahan Casanata and I'm stoked to be with you for the next 90 minutes as I'm joined by incredible guests from across the motu. We're going to head to Queenstown, we're heading to Wellington, Hamilton and Auckland. We have so much to get through. And hopefully this will be a boost of energy for you as we hit the home stretch just before Christmas. Now, before we begin, I want to acknowledge what a tough week it's been for Aotearoa's business community with the death of Jake Miller. Jake was known to many members of the Kiwi SaaS community, including Sian Simpson, who was planning to be here today. Sian won't be joining us, but our thoughts are with all of Jake's friends and whānau as they process what has happened. Business, as we all know, can be, well, pretty lonely and pretty tough, and that's why having a supportive network around you is so important. Today, we'll reveal some exciting plans to take the Kiwi SaaS community to the next level. More on that a bit later. This morning's event is really a chance to reflect on a year like no other. How have New Zealand SaaS companies fared during COVID? Alex Burke from Education Perfect will tell us about how his team is getting on with business. They're really building a world-class brand, so we'll hear about that a bit later. And Mark Clare will update us on the SaaS sector's recent performance and his predictions for the future. We'll also have a lively panel discussion, I hope, looking at the incredible opportunities that lie ahead for your businesses in 2022. Before we kick off, a big thank you to our Kiwi SaaS partners. They're on screen now, and we are very grateful for your ongoing support, not only of today's event, but also the Kiwi SaaS community. We really want you to be part of this morning's conversation. The Zoom Q&A is right at the bottom of your screen, so put your questions in at any point, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. And for the questions that we don't have time to answer, if you pop your name in, we will follow up with you afterwards. The chat function will also be open for you throughout the event, and we'd love you to share your thoughts on social using the hashtag KiwiSaaS. There it is on screen. Let's begin with a question for you this morning. This is a quick poll. What do you think the overall outlook for New Zealand SaaS companies is for the next 12 months? Do you think the sector overall will be in a better state or a worse state than right now? Now, this is an anonymous question, so don't hold back. We do want to hear your thoughts. We'll give you a few seconds now to get your answers in, and the options should be showing on your screen. Okay, pop your answers in if you haven't already. We're going to move on and we'll come back to your answers a little bit later. Time now for our first speaker, Alex Burke, the CEO of New Zealand-based Education Perfect. Alex is going to tell us about his business's recent acquisition and the incredible brand and culture he's built alongside his team. Education Perfect is a leader in the Australian and New Zealand markets, and it now has customers in over 60 countries. Before his current role, Alex built and sold Tiger Spike to a team of 500 located across 12 offices around the globe. Alex is in Queenstown this morning. Kia ora, Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Jihan. Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Hi, so I'm Alex Burke. I'm the CEO of Education Perfect. I'm actually originally from London. I've spent 20 years, though, outside of the UK. I had 15 years in Sydney. Then I had 4 years in Singapore. And then I've just moved to New Zealand only a year ago. So it's fantastic to be in New Zealand and also part of the tech SaaS community. And I hope you enjoy my presentation today. Okay, so in terms of context and background to my presentation, I want to talk to brand and culture, and one, how that unites a team, two, how that drives business results, and three, how that attracts investors and interest in your business. So I'm going to wheel back to my time at Tiger Spike. I was at Tiger Spike for 11 years, of which the final 6 years I was CEO. And I guess it was my sort of traineeship, really, to be a CEO. Our organization, we were very fast growing. So we were in the Deloitte Tech Fast 50 for 7 years in a row. And we got to really good global scales. We got 12 offices all over the world, multiple time zones, and 500 plus Tiger Spikers. And then in 2017, we sold to a US publicly listed business, Synex. Very, very different corporation, very big organization. But we sold that in 2017. Now, my presentation really wants to begin at the start of when I joined as CEO, and that was in 2011. Before that time, when I first joined Tiger Spike, I was the general manager. So I started in Sydney, and then I opened up offices in Melbourne and Singapore. So I had sort of 3 offices in my portfolio. And in that time, I tried a few things, but I'd realized that to unite a team, it was really important to have one culture. And also that culture enabled me to, one, attract people to my team as I was fast growing, but also allow me to connect with customers and build a good customer set. So when I came into being the CEO, my first board meeting, I presented to the board that I felt that it was important that we put pen to paper. We tried to connect the different offices. So I go back to my previous slide. When I joined as CEO, I had my Singapore, my Sydney, and my Melbourne office, but I also had a London and New York office. And those offices weren't performing as well, and they were going in slightly different directions. So for me, it was important to unite things through, firstly, the mission and the culture. We didn't have anything written down as a business, and so people were interpreting the business in different ways and going in different directions. So I created what was called the Tiger Spike Way. They were very simple values, but it were things that could underpin the business, so the business had more of an identity and more of a one-team environment. I then rebranded the organization. It's a super simple thing, but it's amazing how a good t-shirt can connect everyone into one family, one organization. Like as a kid, if you go into a sports team, you feel really pumped if you get your sports t-shirt and unite yourself with the team. I think it's the same aspect of that in the corporate world as well. And so we created this simple brand, a connection through t-shirts and different swag. And so as people join the team from all over the world, they kept connected with us as a business. We then also wanted to connect to the heritage. We were an Australian business, so we started in Sydney. And what was important was, even if we were working in London or New York or other markets, we felt it was important to still celebrate that heritage, celebrate that connection. We didn't, just because we were in, say, London, we didn't need to act and be like a London team to connect with UK customers. Likewise, in the US, it was important that we had that identity. And so we created things like the boomerang. So if we brought people back into the business, we would present them with a boomerang and put their picture on it, just to have that Australian connection. We also spent a bit of time around partnerships. Another way for us to really, help to build our profile, help to build our brand, and also connect the business as well. As you grow your company, as you grow into new markets, it's a fantastic way to accelerate building your profile in market, and also establishing your brand with a very highly reputable brand. And if you have companies like an AWS or a Google or a Telstra or an Apple or whoever it might be singing in the praises of your business, it increases your reputation, it helps you open up more doors, and ultimately helps you build out more of a customer base. The other thing, though, that I spent quite a bit of time on, though, was, as we had this think global, also wanted to act local. So we wanted to always have little local nuances, little subtleties that were important for those markets. So, for example, I opened up a Tokyo office. We had a Friday barbecue in Australia, which was a very Australian thing, but we connected with a Japanese team, and they put their own variant on that to sort of bring people to the company on the Fridays. They invited customers there, and for them it was a unique identity, but it was very subtle, though, to Japan, though, and they put their own sort of Japanese spin on it, so it still had a bit of local flavor. And that's really important as you go into market. While you may have a global brand, it's important to just have those contexts, have people on the ground that can understand the market and understand the little local nuances. And then as a business, basically, as our results grew, with that united team, we brought on massive customers. So we brought on customers like Emirates, grew a really great reputation. And that was all through these sort of fundamentals, very simple foundations, but things that I felt were important around connecting to the team, but also building performance. So now I moved to Education Perfect. So I joined EP in May 2019. The business, when I joined, it had a great product already, but it didn't really have a business around that. And so from my experience before, in my traineeship as a CEO, I guess I thought about it and came up with simple principles that have worked for me before, and tried to implement that into my new business, my new tech SaaS business. So from day one, I set foundations through brand, values, and culture. So I rebranded the business to make it more global, more contemporary, more current, more fresh, and also more adaptability in the brand as well. So where we could bring a different color palette, things that more individuals or corporations would connect to. I then canvassed the whole team and got a feel for what it was like to be an EPEEP. You know, what were the in the DNA of the business, what was really important, things like having a user first kind of mentality, but also some of the other elements that people felt were important. And then we incorporated some that I had before. So for example, End Today, Excited by Tomorrow was one I had at Tiger Spike, which relates to resilience and relates to building up, picking yourself up, because as a business owner and as you're going on a growth journey, you're going to have up and downs, and it's important that you always bounce back and look forward. And then with that as well, with the team and how we connected with our customers, it was really important to humanize our business. So whilst we're humanizing and updating our brand internally, also make that very external facing. So all the things that we're doing internally around our values, around our brand, we're also sharing externally. So we're going to conferences and going into schools, we still had that fresh brand, something that was unique to our own identity. The edtech market is super fragmented. I think there are over 1,000 edtech companies just in Australia and New Zealand, and it's important you have your own unique flavor, your own unique differentiation. Also was thinking about partnerships. Now, in edtech, it's not a business or not really an industry where typically companies have partnered. Most companies work very much in their silos, and they have to work through schools one by one. I've always been a big fan of partnership and collaboration. And so working in the same way as I did with Tigerspike, just to try and establish some relationships with the big players as well in education, trying to find ways of either collaborating on particular case studies or collaborating through tech, through integrations, trying to make those integrations, that ecosystem, a little bit more cohesive. And then similarly to Tigerspike, the think global, act local. When I first joined, we had someone actually based in Sydney who was our international salesperson. And at that time, we weren't really working with many countries at all around the world. Well, what I did straight away was I hired someone in Singapore. I felt it was important that we had someone in a region, so this was in particular Southeast Asian region, to just provide that additional context, just provide that additional insight for us as we were looking at our offering and how we were going to go and take that to market. We've then, over the last year and a half, established individuals in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, Europe, and the US, all of the markets that we're going into. And that's really contributed to our ability to bring on those 60 plus countries. Whilst we're still a tech company, it's very easy to get going. Again, though, that local connection is important. And so that's really been very simple principles, but a little bit part of our little rocket ship. And earlier this year, you would have seen an announcement where we brought on KKR as our new investor. I just want to now talk to a few of the bits and pieces that were important when KKR were looking at EP and looking to invest for our next 4 or 5 year journey. So firstly, and without doubt, the biggest advice for anyone, if you're going in to build and start a tech company, is you need to have a good product. You need to obsess over your customers, and you need to prove that you've got a product that people will engage with. Now, our NPS score was very, very high. Our Net Promoter Score was at 67. Our gross retention rate, which is basically the amount of customers that you retain, was really high. And also we had a real land and expand model. So we had an ability to move from when we land a business or a customer or a school, we're able to grow that. And so we have an average rate of over 120%. Now, for us, we had a number of different users. We've got students, we've got school leaders, parents, and also now teachers. And our obsession over our user has been all over the place in terms of how we get our product to engage, how we connect with teachers to help them use the product, so around professional development, but also things like our overall service offering. So our customer success team, for example, we have an average response time of over just over 7 minutes, which is an incredible statistic. And really that obsession over the experience is important. When KKR were looking at us, they spent a lot of time canvassing our customers and canvassing the industry to get their own scores on us. So whilst we were saying that, they were asking everyone, and it was a really important criteria for them when picking EP, that they knew that ultimately we had a product that customers enjoyed using. The second piece, and this is where I guess the rocket ship on valuations come in, and a really important metrics. A lot of you would have heard the thing around the law of 40. So law of 40 around your revenue growth and your profit. So the left number and the right number. So you might be a 40% growth company, but that's okay then to have a zero profit. Or you might be 20% revenue growth and 20% profit. Now we had very, very strong metrics on both of those, and that's why we were able to get a higher valuation. But the middle one is really important, and this metric really identifies you as a truly tech SaaS business. Now, 87 gross margin. Now, your gross margin means you put your sort of cost of sale into selling a product. Now, if you were a more service-orientated business, so say, for example, a manufacturing business, that might be down at the 30, 40%. If you're a consulting business, so you're trying to sell a product, but you still have to sell lots of services around that, you might be at 60, 70. Now, for a tech SaaS business, you really should be over that 80% mark, demonstrating that you can sell a product with actually minimal kind of additional support that's required. And this is one metric that people will look at because it helps demonstrate, one, that you've got some potential scale to grow faster, and also generate profits over time. And then my last sort of two tips in terms of working with the investment community and also driving business results within your own organization. The first point is around that connection. So you're building a connection with your team, you're building a connection with your customers. Businesses and industries are all about relationships, and it's the same with the investment community. So as you go to meet investors and you're talking to them and talking about your business, you want them to build a connection with you. You want a connection with the product and your brand and everything about you, but also you want to build a relationship with them, because it's a relationship that will be really important. When you're sitting in a boardroom, you're going to be working with them for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So it's important that you have that connection. And don't forget that it's important that you have authenticity and credibility when you're talking to people. Don't feel like you have to sort of create a new persona. Be yourself and trying to build that connection. And then the final piece, and this is really now for my 10 years of being a CEO, there are key fundamentals around driving growth, but more importantly, driving global growth. One, firstly, and it's the biggest thing, you have to prioritize your product. You have to really understand your user. You have to obsess over your user. So even if you get new investment, continue to invest time understanding your customer and understanding whether your product actually meets that need. And then from a business standpoint, do invest time in people culture. Try and create that one team environment. Try and write down your identity, where you come from. It's important because it's a unique story. No one else has the same story. Don't underestimate the power of a brand and investment in that brand. And then finally, partnerships. Always be open to collaborate and open up to other organizations, because those partnerships could potentially open up doors for you in new markets, help you build profile, and help build your reputation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Alex. And I loved what you shared about brand. You're really talking about storytelling there, aren't you? It's using brand and culture and values to share much more widely the amazing work that your organisation is doing. And I guess the T-shirts were part of that. So thank you for what you've shared this morning. Let's go straight to your questions now. Keep them coming in for Alex. Our first question is from Amanda. She's interested in your view on the difference or the uniqueness between the UK, Australians and Kiwis. You've obviously seen a range of different cultural contexts through your work and your travel. Amanda would like to know, do Kiwis do SaaS better or worse or differently as a nation? What do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely. I can speak to really coming into Australasia. The biggest difference I found, so growing up in London and Europe and coming to Australia, and knowing Kiwis, and I'm married to a Kiwi, the first thing that I really felt was that the Kiwis and Australians are a lot more willing to give things a go. When you're in the UK, you can typically, it can be a little bit more difficult. People might be a little bit suspect about what you're thinking, and maybe not as bullish about the opportunity. Whereas coming into this region, it's different. And I think that willingness to sort of give things a go then relates to innovation. So trying to innovate, trying to be a bit different. And so with that, then it does link to technology. And I truly believe, coming into the region and now coming into New Zealand, the world is borderless. There is so much opportunity for a business. And because we have such a great foundation here, as a country and lifestyle, ability to work, ability to sort of free your mind through the nature and walks, etc. It's a big opportunity for us. And the brands of New Zealand and Australia are very strong when you go into the US and the UK. They're very open to talk to you, and generally very warm to connect and build relationships with you, which is obviously critical from a business perspective.
And your company is based in Dunedin. Has that presented any obstacles to global growth?
Yeah, I mean, when I first joined, I definitely spent a bit of time adjusting the culture, actually, and just empowering people to realize that you don't necessarily have to be all in the same room to be successful. And that has been an important adjustment we've made. So now we have a distributed team, for example, from an engineering standpoint. So our heart, and our heart will always be in Dunedin, but we're able to bring resources from lots of parts of Australia and New Zealand. And I think that's really important for anyone going forward, particularly COVID now as well. You want that sort of flexibility. Where Dunedin's been really important to us as a tech SaaS company, though, is around young talent. It's got a really good university there, and we bring in 8 to 10 interns each year that come into the business. We hire about half of those, and that's the next wave of talent, that next wave of kind of capability culture actually within the business. And so having a connection to something like that is important. And Dunedin has one of the best universities in the country, so it's been a real boost for us.
Well, you're very fortunate to have that talent pipeline coming through in Dunedin, and I'm sure there are many other organisations that would love to have access to those new workers. But what are your thoughts on just how tight the labour market is at the moment, and how SaaS companies can create their competitive advantage in the eyes of potential workers?
Yeah, I mean, it's the market's really difficult. The reality is that with COVID, salaries are going up all over the world. There's a constraint on skills and resources in New Zealand. Obviously, it's very difficult to get anyone here, so you can't bring people in, and that does cause issues because there isn't a huge open talent pool here. So I think for any business, again, it goes a little bit back to brand and culture. It's important then in a competitive market that you're transparent about how your business is working, the opportunity, and you have to find a way to attract people to your business and stand out from others. And so it's really worth investing in your people talent management. How you send out job ads, where you look for talent as well, not just generally on general recruitment stores. You get creative with that. And it at this stage, it's I think business critical, because if you can't get the people in, it's very, very difficult to scale and grow.
Chris Leonard has a question for you. He asks, how long did it take for partnerships to amplify the brand sufficiently to result in noticeable revenue growth? And how much effort went into nurturing those partnerships?
Yeah, I think with any relationship, it's not easy. You have to take time and invest time. And the big businesses that I've mentioned, those big tech companies, they're tough to navigate as well, because there's lots of people and lots of different divisions, etc. I can speak to some of the relationships we had at Tiger Spike. We had a fantastic relationship with Apple, and they referred us, I think, to over 50 customers in the time that we were with them. And that relationship took a good sort of 2-3 years to build. There are businesses like AWS, for example, that you can get going straight away in terms of some of the ecosystem that they set up and some support. But from a commercial perspective, I would say I'd highly recommend get started, get talking, start to build some connections. But from an actual commercial perspective, it would typically take a couple of years, I think.
Okay, Alex, that's all we have time for today. Alex Burke, CEO of New Zealand-based Education Perfect, thanks so much for joining us from Queenstown today. Kia ora. Okay, let's take a look now at the results of our earlier poll. Remember, we asked you, what do you think the overall outlook is for New Zealand SaaS companies over the next 12 months? And here's what you said. 42% of you reckon the outlook is looking much better. So that's 42%. 46% said a little better. Only 7% of you are expecting no change. 5% said a little worse. And none of you think that the outlook is looking much worse. So obviously, you've had a coffee today, you're feeling particularly optimistic. That's great to see. And we'll see whether the next speakers that we have support that outlook in our next sessions. So let's move right into our next speaker now. Mark Clare is here to tell us about the performance of the sector. And we'll also ask him to share his predictions for what's to come. Mark is the founder of Clear Capital, and he has over 20 years of commercial and corporate finance experience with a background in investment banking, strategy and technology. And a reminder to pop your questions in the Zoom Q&A for Mark. We'll come to those a little bit later. Mark is with us from Te Whanganui Atara, Wellington this morning. Morena, Mark.
Morena. Kia ora katoa, everybody. As Jeepan said, my name's Mark Clare. I'm the founder of Wellington-based investment bank Clear Capital. The work we do is primarily in the area of mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, and corporate finance and strategy advice. What we're looking to do today is to actually look back a little bit at where we've come through this last stage in the industry, and also to look forward and talk about some of the key metrics and things that we're seeing from the acquirers and investors, what they're looking for from New Zealand companies moving forward. Just going slightly back. We're going to talk today about some numbers, but the first thing I want you to do is to just look primarily at some of the trends that I lay out here. We're going to look at a couple of subsets of the technology industry. We're going to look at some of the listed company metrics and some of the mergers and acquisitions metrics. Now, the very smart entrepreneur, investor, and commentator Rowan Simpson has been writing a fantastic 3 Things newsletter all the way through 2021, and I'd recommend everybody goes and has a look at that. Rowan's asked some really good questions on that, one of which is, what is a New Zealand company? And secondly, what is a tech company? For what we're doing today, we're going to define New Zealand companies as New Zealand headquartered companies. We're going to look at listed companies, but it could be listed companies on either the NZX or the ASX. And when it comes to what is a technology company, we're focusing on software and SaaS, but we're also looking at some of the gaming companies and things like that. So that's where we're going to start. Now, I hope that the materials are clear enough on the stuff on the screen here. 2006 was a big year. Now, prior to 2006, we have always had technology here in New Zealand. Companies such as Gallagher, Jade, and Datacom have always been here within the market. There's a long history of it. But here at Clear Capital, in the current tech cycle, we look at the big bang as being the sale of Trade Me to Fairfax in 2006, in March 2006. For context, at the same time, the listed New Zealand technology sector or software sector was tiny at only about $10 million of listed companies. There is nothing in the SaaS space. Xero's still 12 months away from IPOing, and mergers and acquisitions activity outside of Trade Me's reasonably minimal. It's pretty much day one, but 2006 was the start of a lot of things. If we jump forward 4 years, we see the impact of the GFC through a number of the metrics. We have had a number of IPOs through this process and this time. Xero's IPO'd, Raycon's IPO'd, Diligent's IPO'd. We're starting to see SaaS be a part of it. The SaaS numbers we have there, really, that's a combination of Xero plus Diligent. So SaaS is already quite quickly being about half of the listed New Zealand tech story, even by 2010, with Xero already about a third of it, but only at very small levels compared to where we are at the moment. The level of M&A activity at this time is actually pretty minimal. We'll be missing a range of technology M&A deals potentially here, but there's only a small amount going on. Now, in the box at the bottom there, I just want to note down, in 2007, a year after Trade Me was acquired by Fairfax, Telecom New Zealand sold their Yellow Pages business, a business with more than 95% of its revenues from physical print advertising, and private equity entities came in and bought that for $2.2 billion. We're going to come back to revisit that particular transaction, but I want to just flag, Lyd, there were other deals happening, but again, the tech side of things is moving through there. If we jump forward 5 years further on and things are starting to take off, we've got $7.5 billion worth of listed technology companies. Xero's sitting there with a $3 billion market cap. Trade Me's been relisted and IPO'd on the market, and a range of other companies are coming through. Serco, who had listed in the middle of 2014, has only a $61 million market cap at this stage. But again, we're starting to see the SaaS numbers start to materially take off. You've got a large number of, a decent percentage, just under 80% of the listed market is SaaS, and you've got Xero being more than half of that. Now, we're starting to see more technology deals and mergers and acquisitions activity starting to happen, but it's getting there, and it's still reasonably early on in the process. Now, if we jump forward 6.5 years to where we are today, and it's fair to say that the acceleration has really taken off. Today, we have $28.5 billion of listed New Zealand headquartered technology businesses. Xero does dominate that at $22.5 billion. But we've also seen companies like Serco that were 5 years ago only $61 million market caps, over $850 million. SaaS really totally dominates this space now. We've gone from SaaS being nothing to SaaS being 95% of this dramatic growth. And I do want to flag that Xero itself is 80% of the overall total, which does show the importance and the influence of companies like Xero, that if we can get those companies moving into that space. Now, from a mergers and acquisitions point of view, this is a part where it is suddenly completely taken off. We have seen over the last 6 years a number of take-private transactions like Trade Me, but the level of activity has absolutely taken off. People look back at Trade Me back in 2006, and one person turned around and told me at the time that we'd never see another period of time where New Zealand technology businesses would be valued as highly as $500 million plus in mergers and acquisitions activity. In 2021 alone, in the SaaS mergers and acquisition space, if we combine Sequent, Timely, and Vend, there's over $2 billion of M&A exits we've seen just in this last 12 months. That's an incredible level of activity. A number of people get worried about whether we're seeing businesses be sold offshore. Our view on it is that it's a great story, money's capability and that come into the market. It's a sign of a healthy market when there's a level of M&A activity, positive level of M&A activity going on. Rod Drury sold Aftermail to Quest before going out and setting up Xero. It's a fantastic story. Now, I want to stress these numbers are crazy. Even here within my firm, when we did some of this analysis, the team internally here were blown away by how much growth we've seen over this last 15 and a half years. It's an incredible story, and it's a story that everybody here in the New Zealand sector should be really, really proud of. Now, I'm being asked a bunch of times and being asked to talk about some of the near-term and slightly longer-term next steps. Now, if I start talking about listed companies and start giving investment advice, I'm going to get into a world of trouble. The comment that I would say, however, is if we're sitting here today now and we look at some of these numbers, I know I'd like to have a time machine to be able to go back with some capital and put a little bit more investment into some of the New Zealand SaaS companies in 2015 or ideally 2010. We've seen an incredible period of growth and value creation through that. When it comes to mergers and acquisitions, I'm in a better position to talk to some of that in more detail. Here at Clear Capital, over the last period of time, we've helped companies such as Homes.co.nz with its sale to Trade Me, Hatch with their sale to FNZ, the sale of Star now to Backstage. It's been a record year here at Clear Capital, and the level of activity we're continuing to see into the future is continuing. We have a pipeline of both domestic and international parties coming through. I'm not expecting to see that mergers and acquisitions level of activity slow at any stage over the near term. When we look slightly further out, that does start to get hard. And coming back to the transaction where the Yellow Pages was acquired for $2.2 billion. In hindsight, that looks like an absolutely crazy transaction. It looks mad, and the financial results for the people that bought it were terrible. And part of the reason for that is they viewed the future was going to look like the past. And it's very hard for people to be able to almost bring some of that stuff out and take it away. So what do I think about, thinking further afield out to the 2030s and places like that? What does it mean for the New Zealand market? First of all, I do expect we're going to see a trend where the companies that are already listed will continue to do well. SaaS isn't going anywhere. More and more companies are trying to SaaSify their offerings to make it more compelling and to bring some of those software economics to bear on some of the pieces there. The key question and key scenario comes down to, are we going to be able to build more of the companies like Xero, Pushpay, Serco, Vista around it? Are the very smart entrepreneurs here in New Zealand going to be able to take the learnings and lessons from this period of growth that we've been through already and bring those lessons, the innovative thinking, and combine it with the capital that is that has become into the New Zealand market to be able to build those next tier of companies? I'm betting the New Zealand entrepreneurs would, but we need all of you out there to be bold and to move forward and to take some of those next stages of risks, which allows me to move on to the next stage of what I'm going to talk about, which is based on all of the stuff we've seen here, what are we seeing as the metrics and key characteristics of companies that are being attractive, are being seen to be attractive for international investors and domestic investors and international acquirers. What do you need to be showing to some of these parties to achieve some of the outcomes we've seen over the historic bit? The first is you need to have a large total addressable market. There's a reason that ultimately Xero was able to be much more valuable than TradeMe, and that was the size of its market. One's global, one's focused on New Zealand. We've also seen with some of the vertical plays, we've seen Vista and Sequent go on and create incredibly valuable businesses by owning vertical parts of larger markets. It's vital that you're able to articulate a large total addressable market story for investors. The second one is what we called annualized recurring revenue here. But what I mean by that is you need to have a level of revenue scale. And this is one of the traction points which has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. Where there was once upon a time where you could tell a story just with a PowerPoint presentation about what you're going to do. Now you need to be able to prove it. If you've got less than $1 million of annualized recurring revenue, it's hard to have a conversation with an investor or an acquirer. Once you hit $1 million, options open. At 5 million plus, you're going to have a range of options. And at over $10 million of annualized recurring revenue, you're going to have considerably more options and an international range of them. The third bit is part of what Alex from his presentation at around Education Perfect was talking about, which is underlying unit economics. And this is a key change that's happened over the last 5 years and dives into some of the metrics materials that we're talking about. Now, underlying unit economics means, do you have fundamentally a good business underpinning the product that you have built and the revenues that you are generating? We talked about gross margins there, which Alex referenced as well. And gross margins are a key part of it. You need to show that you have proper software economics gross margins. And I agree with Alex that the magic number is 80%. Alex talked about 87% for them. That's a fantastic number. But the key thing with having those underlying unit economics is you need to be able to tell that story that once you get to a level of scale, it's going to all be about being able to make profits and generate real cash flows, and you need to be able to show that. Now, having these three components here in place is all about generating and earning the right to have a revenue multiple. Being able to sit with an acquirer or an investor and say, my business is worth a multiple of the annualized recurring revenue I'm generating. I have a large total addressable market. I have a level of scale of revenues, and I have good underlying unit economics. And the fourth one of those, which determines to a large extent how you're going to be valued, is how fast you're growing. And this is the next key component around it. And at the early stages, and Alex rightly talked about the rule of 40, which again is for, you're adding your revenue growth to your EBITDA margins, and you're allowed to trade the ones off there. But for the earlier stage companies focused on growth, investors were really looking for you to be doing 100% year on year, ideally. And some of the best in class companies we're seeing are growing at 15% month on month. To give you an idea of how where the level of scrutiny on that, if you're growing at 15% month on month, you're doubling your revenues every 5 months. Now, at Clear Capital, a quick case study. At Clear Capital, we've recently helped Apply ID, a New Zealand SaaS company, raise $7 million from some investors in the UK. The very talented CEO there, Russell Smith, when he was sitting here in the office with me, turned around and said, Mark, why do you want to be working with us? And I said, look, Russell, you've got a large total addressable market, you've got a level of scale, you've got fantastic underlying unit economics, and your revenue growth is outstanding. Russell turned around to me and said, but Mark, what about me and my team? And I said, look, yes, you and your team are fantastic and you've got great people there around it, but for investors and acquirers in the SaaS space, they want to be able to look at a business without having to worry about superstar management. And they want businesses that are so compelling in their own right that they can't be ignored. And if you've got all of these types of metrics coming in here, you've got you've got a high quality business that's going to be attractive to investors and acquirers all the way around. Now, that's probably enough from me. I think it's probably time to get some questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mark. Some pretty staggering numbers in your presentation there and lots of reasons to be optimistic for the SaaS sector in New Zealand. Let's get straight to those questions. The first one is from Nathan. Nathan's asking about any observations around offshore investment into the New Zealand examples you used in your presentation versus domestic funds.
Yeah. The fantastic thing that we are seeing here in New Zealand is the amount of capital that is now available in the New Zealand market is at a level we haven't seen for a long period of time. We've, funds like Movac, Pinkaro, GD1, Punakaiki Fund, there is a level of capital here in the New Zealand market, which is great. We ended up with the Apply ID capital raise actually getting the money out of the UK because there was a key market there that that was attractive, and having somebody from the UK there on the cap table was a good thing. But we're seeing both a combination of international investors coming in, but there is a set of now very high quality, experienced investors here in the New Zealand market that are doing fantastic work.
Mark wants to know about whether you get the impression that there's a healthier appetite for risk by investors.
Yes, the comment that we would turn around and say is it's not reckless at all. What we're seeing is investors take risk, but they're taking it in a structured way. Again, they know which stage of investments they want to look at, and they are looking for some of the key metrics which underpin those ones around it. And companies need to be able to tell a story around their metrics for the right type of investors. People need to understand where they play and how they're attractive to some of the investors. And we are seeing more risk being taken, but yeah, it's calculated professional investors making calculated professional decisions.
And you mentioned metrics there. Tell us, what are the specific metrics that you think are most important for companies to be tracking?
Look, there's as you mentioned, we're doing a SaaS metrics component around it. One of the fantastic things about SaaS is there are so many numbers. It's a part that makes it a very attractive bit for investors and acquirers. They feel they can dive into companies. Just as a very, very quick overview, we would expect companies to be able to have a very good grasp of what their revenues are. What is subscription revenue? What is transaction volume revenues? What are other revenues? How do they interact? What is your cost to serve around those ones to give you, cost to serve those customers? What does that mean for your gross margins, flagging the 80%? There are a number of other revenue metrics that people are looking for, which includes the likes of net revenue retention, and you need to be able to tell cohort analysis about your customers. Down further, you need to be able to articulate the cost to acquire customers and be able to talk about churn and a range of other metrics there. It's quite a wide group there, but it can be captured reasonably quickly. And that's before we get into some of the other metrics, that Alex flagged there, from net revenue retention to net promoter scores and things like that. There is a wide range.
Richard says, over the past couple of years, we've seen much more New Zealand-sourced capital looking to invest in New Zealand tech firms. Will the growth in locally based investors change the tech sector in New Zealand, or are Kiwi investment funds behaving fundamentally the same way as offshore funds?
The New Zealand funds are, there's some very high quality people putting money to work in the New Zealand space now, and they've got a track record of success. They definitely bring a New Zealand perspective to it, and we think there's a lot of value having New Zealand local investors on cap tables because they understand the market and they can be close to it. But in a lot of ways, they are bringing the same levels of discipline that we see in international deals. We still are seeing New Zealand deals be more founder friendly and in the way in looking at deal terms than we're seeing from some international funds. But yeah, so big ups to the local New Zealand ones, and the New Zealand investors have all got now good high quality exit stories to be able to tell.
And our last question comes from Xavier. Xavier says, do you need to set up a plan to be ready for capital raise, or do you focus on growing your business and raise capital when the time is right?
A great question. It's always going to be a lot easier if you've got a plan to do it. All of the high quality mergers and acquisitions and capital raising processes that we're involved in tends to be with very organized and very structured entrepreneurs that have broad plans in place. Now, the comment around that is there's not enough hours in the day for SaaS entrepreneurs to be able to be doing everything. And yes, you should be focusing on the growth of the business, but if you want to get a high quality outcome in either capital raise or an M&A process, spending some time and being ready for that and having things lined up is a very smart thing to be doing. And as Alex from Education Perfect rightly said, forming some of those relationships with both investors and potential acquirers is a very, very smart thing to do.
Wise words there. Thank you very much, Mark Clare, founder of Clare Capital. Appreciate your time today. And Mark will be hosting a workshop on metrics that matter at Southern SaaS, which we are now pleased to announce has been rescheduled for the 23rd and 24th of March 2022. So put that in your diary. Visit kiwisas.com for more details as they're confirmed over the coming weeks. Now, speaking of SaaS metrics that matter, here is some food for thought from Serge Van Dam. Serge is the star of many of our Kiwi SaaS videos today, and we were unable, of course, due to lockdown, to film our Auckland-based SaaS investor directors. Serge is also going to lead our panel discussion, which is coming up next.
I think benchmarking is absolutely integral for any business. And if we shared that knowledge a little bit more, we would understand where we sat in the market. It would give us better knowledge on where we should be hyper-focusing our resources in order to maximize our impact or the benefits.
One of the unique things about the SaaS sector compared to some of the other more traditional export sectors is that these companies are selling different things to different markets, and so they have no natural points of comparison. And so the best way to try and address that challenge is to benchmark yourself around these standardized unit economics or metrics that the SaaS industry has, and comparing yourself against your peers. And I think a national benchmark exercise is achievable in a country of the size of New Zealand, and it's also very, very useful to the leadership teams of these SaaS companies. Most SaaS companies understand the most important KPIs, things like lifetime value and cost of acquisition, but perhaps some of the founders, especially earlier stage companies, are not thinking about that day to day, and maybe they should. Kia ora koutou, I'm Serge Van Dam, and today we've already heard about benchmarking the SaaS industry, building collective capabilities in companies, building a support network, and I guess how we grow the SaaS sector and the companies in it. Today I'm moderating a panel, and I'm joined by three of my panelists for a brief discussion, and we'll talk about the key industry challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for us. Firstly, let's welcome our panelists. Donna Marie Ryder is a known AI and process automation thought leader. She's the founder and CEO of Waikato-based voice-activated accounting service Tanya.ai. Also with me will be Nick Whitehead, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Serco, who we've heard about today. He's the Global Marketing Manager there, and he's got a sight set on building a billion-dollar business. Also joining us will be a CEO and co-founder of Preno, Amelia Gain. It's a hotel property management software company with customers all around the world. These three companies are all at various stages, but they're all B2B SaaS companies taking on the world. A warm welcome to you all. Thanks for being part of the conversation. So to kick us off, Donna Marie, the first question, What's the biggest challenge for you right now?
Yeah, look, the biggest challenge at the moment is being able to resource our scale-up phase. So we're currently bootstrapped and makes it really difficult to be able to access the expert resources we need during these next 6 months as we look to roll out globally.
Amelia, what about you? What's the biggest challenge you're facing?
We're going through a cap raise at the moment. But additional to that, we sell to hotels who are directly impacted by COVID. We're growing well through that, but we're continually having to adjust how we sell and support to them.
Yeah, capital raising is obviously part of the journey for every SaaS company, as Mark alluded to earlier. Nick, you're obviously in a bigger business with a bigger team. What are you thinking about, and what's your biggest challenge as you try and grow Serco in, I guess, similarly challenged situation?
Yeah, thanks, Serge. Well, hey, I'll let you in on a little secret. Serco isn't a SaaS company. We're actually a people company that makes SaaS products. And if we want to make more cooler stuff more faster, we need more SaaS people. And our current growth plans will see Serco add hundreds of people over the next year or so. So our biggest challenge is, where do we get them from? You know, poaching from Xero and Pushpay is a zero-sum game. Immigration or importing talent isn't really an option at the moment. So our challenge is figuring out, how do we sustainably fuel the growth in the SaaS industry with local talent and capability? And I think that's not just a challenge for Serco at our stage of growth, it's a challenge for the whole SaaS industry. And that's why I'm really excited about the potential of this community.
Awesome. So we hope to have thousands of members of this Kiwi SaaS community we're building. What do you think the role is of the community itself on that capability or that talent question you just posed?
Well, I think a community is greater than the sum of its parts. And you know, there are hundreds of incredibly capable and experienced SaaS professionals in New Zealand already, but they're relatively disconnected, as you kind of pointed out in your video earlier. And I think their learnings are hidden and they're kind of operating in a vacuum. And you know, I imagine if all the players in the SaaS world in New Zealand, and I mean all the players, everybody from the startups through the listed tech companies and even the global players like AWS and Microsoft who are here in New Zealand, you know, imagine the potential if we all became net contributors to the community. I think employment in the country. So I think that's kind of our responsibility to pay it forward and to become a net contributor, not just through altruism, but ultimately because it's going to help us all to grow more sustainably. So that's what I see the value of the community being, and that's what I'm particularly pumped about today.
And Amelia, you've been part of a whole lot of the events that we've run along over the years, and I hope you will be in the future. What does the community, the Kiwi SaaS community, mean for you and some of your people when it comes to capability building specifically?
It's been incredibly important. I think the community, as was just highlighted before, a lot of similar companies are going through the same challenges, and just to be able to share learnings with each other can really help you move that much faster. Yeah, it's been super helpful.
And Donna Marie, for you, I guess you're earlier in your journey than some of these other companies. So interested in hearing for you around your own personal capability development. And then particularly if you want to comment on the fact that you're not in a major centre, you're Waikato based, whether that has any considerations around what you need from a community and I guess what you might want to contribute to one.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest challenge we have based in Hamilton is not so bad, simply because, especially with COVID, a lot of people are online, and so we're able to get the support we need. But as a startup, it does sometimes, I think, you feel like you're by yourself. Having a community of SaaS companies that are at different stages within their life cycle, it enables us to almost step through that learning phase a lot quicker, just like Amelia said, but also be able to not have to step into the big black holes. Community will be able to avoid those, and then also be able to scale up a lot quicker. We'll be able to take note of the different steps that other more established organizations are making. But then also on the flip side, I think as a startup, we're embracing new technology. And so although those established businesses will be helping us as a startup, we can also contribute to them being able to keep up with the play of the latest technology that's out there.
And how do you see yourself paying it forward in the future? I guess Nick mentioned before about the responsibility we all have to kind of pave the way and also contribute to the community. There's obviously things we want to take out of it in terms of knowledge and contacts and all of those things. How do you think about in terms of paying it forward for you personally?
Yeah, well, Tania.ai, obviously, we have a backstory which is about giving back to our community, building prosperity of small to medium organisations within New Zealand, as well as building capability in tech within our own personal organisation. In terms of paying it forward from a SaaS community perspective, I think the community, when we all come together, we're able to create like a step ladder approach. And so as technology companies like ours at a startup phase, we move through those different phases. When we essentially get to the more established phase, then we're able to start to give back to our startup cohorts that are coming through years later. So I think what it does is it creates a full 360 circle of life, which enables us to continue to build and improve capability amongst the SaaS communities that will be on the platform.
And going back to your comment around responsibility, Nick, I guess Serco is obviously a much bigger beast. You're publicly listed, all of that stuff. What do you think should be expected from companies like Serco or Xero or Pushpay in terms of their participation in the community?
Oh, that's a great question. Look, I think there are some big programs that we can be involved in, but I also think it's at a very individual level. 3 years ago, Serco expanded into North America, and I really wish I could go back in time and tell myself 3 years ago what I know now. And I think it would have made the journey a lot easier for me if I could have learned, from those mistakes. But we're not alone, right? The Pacific Ocean between here and the USA is littered with the bodies of, technology companies who have tried to make that launch into North America. And I just think of, imagining tapping into the kind of collective knowledge, experience, and the failures and the successes of companies that have been before us and the leaders that have been before us. So for me, that responsibility can be as simple as sharing the war stories, sharing the scar tissue and helping others. I really loved Donna Marie's reference to a step ladder, just helping people understand the steps that we've been through, the missteps. For me, it can be as simple as that from a responsibility of contributing to the community.
Awesome. So shifting gears altogether, let's talk a little bit about benchmarking, data, all of that stuff. So if you think about the metrics in your business, Amelia, what do you pay attention to the most at the moment, and how do you think about the level of instrumentalization in your company?
Yeah, I suppose a critical one for us as we navigate this time with our customers through COVID is not only churn, but also cost of acquisition that we're watching closely during this time. But all the metrics actually go into helping us build out our forecast as well. So they're critical to everything we do in the business, essentially.
Good morning, Donna Marie. What's the one number that you think about the most?
I actually think about growth, week-on-week growth. I mean, the benefit of having a benchmark, especially across all of our SaaS organisations, I didn't know it, recently joined up the Level Up program. I didn't know that there are some key metrics that we should be achieving as a startup. We started 6 months ago. In the first 3 months, we could see that the voice channel that we had gone live on hadn't taken as we expected, without understanding that there is these numbers and there are these metrics that we should be working to and should be achieving by certain times. Actually enables us now to be able to pivot. We've pivoted to a chat channel, which is actually showing that our product market fit is a lot more closer to what we need it to be. So monitoring that week-on-week growth, most definitely.
Excellent. And Nick, as a publicly listed company, in terms of the metrics you guys pay the most attention to at the leadership conversations, which metrics get the most attention and get the most debate?
Yeah, well, so as you mentioned, we've got to publish our results or our performance data pretty regularly to the markets. And it's really interesting seeing those get dissected by the media and analysts, and really interesting to see what they pick up on, particularly in the media, where they really look at things like loss. But I think that's one of the cool things about SaaS is that we are able to operate in a cash burn environment, and that's probably one of the key metrics that we're really focused on as a leadership team, is making sure that we're staying within that cash burn envelope. Our CEO constantly refers to the importance of cash. He says it's more important than your mother when it comes to SaaS companies. But that's what's cool about SaaS, is that if you're in manufacturing or traditional environments, you can only really hire as fast as your revenues grow. Whereas in SaaS, often you're investing ahead of the revenue. So you're able to bring on people, you're investing in talent, you're investing in growth to enable it to come, rather than waiting for the growth to come and then leveling up. So cash burn is certainly super important for us as an organization. And I'm also starting to get excited about more holistic measures of our performance, like ESG, which is something that we're really starting to take a lot of notice of. Like, what is our impact? How do we start to measure it? How do we think about improving it? There's always new measures to kind of look at. So that's what's exciting.
Awesome. Obviously, the topic of benchmarking's come up. One of the things the Kiwi SaaS community is going to do is set up a national benchmark for the SaaS industry and the individual companies within it. Amelia, what do you think that might do for you, or how would it help or hinder you in your role as CEO and founder of a company that's at its early stage but has some of these metrics already in place?
Yeah, I think it would be hugely important because, as I said, we've been watching our metrics and measuring along all the way through the journey. We've had the benefit of having some benchmarking with Oxygen advisors who have been hugely helpful, but just having a wider pool of companies to measure against, I think, would be useful for all, as mentioned before, all in different verticals, going into different markets. It can just be, it can be hard to compare sometimes. So I think just having a range of benchmarks will be so helpful.
Excellent. So Donna Marie, I'm going to ask you to give us the last word. What's the last thing you'd like to share with the SaaS community, either about your own journey or what's ahead for the SaaS community?
Yeah, I think given things that have happened over the last week, startup life is really tricky. I think one of the key benefits of the SaaS community will be the opportunity for us as startups to be able to be amongst a larger community, not just of startups, but of different stages. I think that will help with us being able to grow, to share, like you say, the war stories, the pressure that people are under. And that's where I really think this community can make a big difference in terms of SaaS startup organisations within New Zealand.
Awesome. Hey, well, we've got a couple of questions here from some of our viewers. I'll start with Danielle's question, which is really about the long-term capability development. How might we, it's a bit of a long question, but what engagement do we have to have with high schools and I guess younger people to showcase and visualize the roles that they could aspire to? So Amelia, you're the youngest person on the panel. Maybe I'll ask you that question. What do you think we should be doing in terms of high school, maybe even primary school, universities, around creating visibility of the opportunities, and not just in engineering? I guess that's the area most people pay attention to, but some of the other roles in SaaS companies like customer success and B2B marketing and so on.
Yeah, I've done a few talks with some all-girls schools. Some have entrepreneurial programs now, and it's so amazing to me just the ideas that they're coming up with and the interest in STEM and tech in particular. So I think there is a lot of work going into that at the moment, but I know that there's probably a lot more that we can do. But I think the passion and the drive from young people is there.
Excellent. And Donna Marie, it's obviously no secret that Māori Pacifica are underrepresented in the SaaS industry. Do you think there's a different answer to getting more engagement from Māori and Pacifica students early in their journeys to hopefully aspire to be in companies like yours?
Yeah, look, I think that the more they see more Māori like myself, like some of my team stepping into tech roles, the more other SaaS organisations are led by Māori, not just women, but men as well. It actually enables and empowers them to feel like that is possible for them. I think that we've got a bit of a way to go. There's still a long journey ahead for Māori and Pacific Island to be in terms of the percentage that we have currently within the tech sector. But I think just being able to show that it's possible is definitely the one thing that would help that.
Well, let's make that happen. Murray asked a question about, and I'll probably place that on you, Nick. How high would you place hiring software developers on your list of critical scale-up challenges? And then how global does the solution have to be? I.e., should all these people be recruited domestically in New Zealand? Or how do you think about that hiring software engineers at scale?
In terms of the importance, put it pretty much number one at the moment in terms of our priorities. We've just been through a capital raise, which takes away some risks and challenges, but it brings new ones, right? Which means that we have to actually deliver and execute on what we told the market that we would do. And as I said before, we can only do that by bringing in more and more capable people into the organization. We are a New Zealand-centric business, but we are also a global, tech company. We have operations in China, the US, and Australia, and we're going to have to continue to look at globalizing our operating model as we've seen kind of the challenges with a very, very thin or limited talent pool in New Zealand. So I think the answer is probably twofold. How do we solve for our talent solution, our talent challenge? One is a more global operating model, and the second is investing to be able to have a deeper talent pool to tap into in New Zealand as well.
And Amelia, how are you thinking about that? You've got to compete with the likes of Serco and Nick and those guys. Are you thinking about building a team in Auckland specifically? How are you thinking about the location of your team as it scales?
Yeah, well, obviously a very different size to Serco, but definitely in terms of growing the team, it's front of mind at the moment. We as a team really love to have our team close and nearby. So currently we're all based in New Zealand, and that's because we like to be able to collaborate and learn together as well and work faster. So we haven't looked offshore to date. So we'd be continuing to look to build our team in New Zealand, but we'll see what challenges come at the moment.
Excellent. So, Donna Marie, the last question for you is, you think about Kiwi SaaS, the, organisation we're launching today and talking about. What's the one thing or the single most important thing you hope to get out of the community as we build it over the years? The one thing.
One thing. Wow, that's tricky. I think the biggest thing from a startup point of view is having a clear roadmap about what scale looks like, what key steps that we can take, and it's actually to having a support network and community around us to be able to make that happen, because I don't think it'll happen without it. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Any other thoughts that you want to leave people with, Donna Marie, in terms of, if they're in the same situation as you, early stage, having to make compromises, hack their way into being a viable business? What advice or what last thoughts have you got for them?
Yeah, look, I think believe in yourself. I think connect as quickly as you can to other tech leaders, other leaders of SaaS organizations, and working within accelerators and startup communities, because what you do is that it'll stop you from going down the wrong pathway. Sometimes as a startup we can fumble along by ourselves. I think being able to make those connections so that you know exactly where you need to go is really good, as well as continuing to believe the impossible or what is possible to be able to get you through.
Excellent. And Nick, for you, final thoughts, particularly perhaps to people who might be thinking about coming from the corporate sector into the SaaS sector or high growth and early stage companies, what would you say to them?
Well, firstly, I wish there were more and more people trying to move into the technology space from corporate world. I think one of the key tenets to this whole mission of creating this community is that the value and the potential of SaaS in New Zealand is really underrepresented in media, in education, in government support. And I really hope that through this initiative, we can create a much bigger profile for the industry. And I think that will make it much easier for us to attract people in from the corporate world, that we become one of the most desirable careers for people who are leaving school or tertiary education. So that's my one big hope for this community.
Awesome. And last, Amelia, for you, people who are thinking about becoming a founder and going on the roller coaster that you're in the middle of, what's the one piece of advice or one suggestion you might make to them?
Hard to distill to just one, but I would say make sure that you understand your problem that you're solving really well. Have a good amount of passion and resilience, as Donna Marie talked to before. But also just reach out and talk to people. Most people who have are ahead of you, have been down the track a bit further, are willing to help and share advice as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you to my panelists. That's all we've got time for at the moment. I'm sure we're all passionate about the industry and our projects and our journeys, and we could talk forever, but we've got to move on. So now, I guess finally from us here, or at least from me, is a word from the Honourable Dr. David Clark. He's our first ever Digital Economy and Communications Minister, which at least signals how important the SaaS and digital sector have become to the future of Aotearoa. And then I'll pass it on to Jahan, who will wrap up our session. Thank you for joining us.
Ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā karangatanga maha Aotearoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Nō ka te hana rei ki haere mai ki te whakanuia tēnei hui ngā whakahirehira. Nō reira, ngā manaakitanga ki runga i a tātou katoa. Tēnā koutou, huri noa i te whare, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Thanks for having me here at the Kiwi Software as a Service event. One of the best things about this portfolio is being able to meet companies and business leaders that are paving the way for Aotearoa New Zealand as a smart, savvy digital nation. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you already and being exposed to the global opportunity around software as a service. As you know, I'm currently progressing the new digital strategy for Aotearoa. This will be our blueprint for a higher productivity, lower emissions future where all New Zealanders have the opportunity to flourish. I believe we have the potential to be a world-leading digital nation built on trust and known for the ethical deployment of new technologies. The strategy will be framed around three pillars: trust, mahi tika; inclusion, mahi tahi; and growth, mahi ake. Testing these with New Zealanders over the last 6 weeks has confirmed that there's solid support for this framing. The Digital Technologies Industry Transformation Plan, or ITP, is a critical initiative to give life to the growth ambition of the digital strategy. The work on the ITP has examined the opportunity for New Zealand around software as a service. This isn't the only area the ITP is focusing on. We're also looking at interactive media as an example. But it's clear that we need to rally behind what a thriving SaaS sector can offer to our economy. New Zealand's top-earning SaaS businesses are booming. There's also a strong pipeline of up-and-coming software businesses supporting this growth. New Zealand software businesses generate high revenue per employee, with Pushpay earning $623,000 per employee, Xero earning $233,000 per employee, and Vista earning $187,000 per employee. SaaS businesses are highly scalable, with low constraints to growth. To achieve software success, New Zealand businesses only need a keyboard, an internet connection, and most importantly, people. With the right training and support, there are low barriers to obtaining a job in software. It's these features that I think are hugely relevant for New Zealand's recovery from COVID-19 and how we can accelerate our growth over the years ahead. We need more New Zealanders, including those that are currently well underrepresented in the tech sector, like Māori, Pacific peoples, women, and people with disabilities, to be looking at this industry with ambition and drive. Career pathways into the sector range from industry training straight out of high school to PhDs in the most technical of subjects. More SaaS businesses means more high-paying jobs for more New Zealanders and a more productive economy. I see the Kiwi SaaS community as a great initiative to help build SaaS capability in New Zealand. I encourage all members of our SaaS businesses to get behind it and to register at kiwisaas.com. I know that this will become a forum for connections, inspiration, highlights, and sharing of knowledge and ideas. Growing a global business can be a lonely experience, so I'm pleased that the ITP can support this initiative as a practical way of helping business leaders to grow and learn from those who've gone before, and from other experts in the field of business growth. The ITP is also specifically focusing on our skills pipeline, and I know this has been an issue for many businesses over recent months. It's certainly the issue that's raised most commonly with me. Accessing people with the right level of skills and experience is challenging. We need a stronger balance between training New Zealanders and accessing offshore talent when that makes sense again. Drawing to a close, I just want to reiterate how grateful I am to be given the opportunity to speak today. I really do think this is a huge opportunity for New Zealand businesses to take strong footholds in the global software market, and more importantly, to create higher value jobs for people of all backgrounds. And I will be following with very close interest. Nō reira, ngā manaakitanga ki runga i a tātou katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Nice one, thank you Minister, and great to see your enthusiasm for the sector. Now, in recent months, the Kiwi SaaS team has been collecting feedback from across the sector, and in 2022, this is big news, we'll see the launch of a private, free-to-join Kiwi SaaS online community. And the vision is for a community owned and driven by you. It's your chance to have a voice. So as you heard the Minister say there, go to the new look website, kiwisaas.com, to learn more and to register your interest. There you'll also find info about upcoming learning sessions, March's Southern SaaS dates, and a recording of the latest highly popular learning session with Linda Jenkinson, Growth Mindset, How to Grow a $1 billion Business. Linda, along with Serge and Bruce Gordon and Aaron Ward, they make up the new Kiwi SaaS Community Advisory Council. The sector has already seen phenomenal growth, so just imagine how a strong SaaS community can build on this, as well as helping you to grow your network, career, knowledge, your business, and of course your impact, helping you to give back. So very exciting news. It sounds like 2022 will be a bumper year. And that is us for today. What a brilliant morning it's been. A big thank you to our speakers and our panelists, and thank you to you for making time to join us. A recording of today's session will be available shortly, and keep an eye on your inbox for a link to join the Kiwi SaaS community, or you can jump over to kiwisaas.com and register right now. Enjoy the rest of your day and make sure you do have a decent break over summer so that you're ready to kick SaaS in 2022. Mā te wā.
I think we need a SaaS community for the industry. It doesn't naturally have one because each of the companies are selling to different markets, different verticals, different business models, different price points. So there's no natural aggregation of all of these companies that are going global from New Zealand. And so a community will be really useful to bring together peers who have an ability to compare notes, whether you're a marketing leader, a product leader, a technology leader, a sales leader, a CEO and a founder.
Getting together with like-minded individuals or who have the same leadership positions as you, or are even just someone in your field, like this, getting together with a bunch of different salespeople, actually builds your capability, your confidence, gets you thinking outside the box.
I think there is great value and perspective of stepping back, engaging externally, and from that comes a lot of creativity, perspective, insight that's not available when you're constantly looking within.
For founders and CEOs, it's a pretty lonely job and you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So you need support to deal with those highs and those lows in particular. And the best way to do that is to have a community of like-minded founders and leaders who are in the same boat as you.
A lot of SaaS growth is coming from the regions inside of New Zealand. It's lonely enough if you're in Auckland, but being in the regions it can be really lonely, so doing what we can to encourage meetups and encourage community in those areas is hugely important for New Zealand.
I think we need a cohesive voice to help unite all of our industries together and also work more cohesively with the government.
We should have a really big, ambitious target when it comes to the SaaS sector. I see no reason why in 10 years the SaaS sector can't be New Zealand's #1 exporter and also the employer of the highest paid jobs in the country. I see a world where we have 500 or so global champions building productivity software for the world's best businesses, all done here in Aotearoa. Join the community that we're building around the Kiwi SaaS companies, participate, pay it forward, and encourage those in your organisations and those peers of yours that you know to join the community as well.
Just join, sign up and register your interest today.